Okay, so in this training, we're going to be going through our signature system on how to scale a sales team efficiently whilst avoiding wasting time and money, which is obviously very important for companies at this present time. Now, why are businesses struggling to scale sales? Because the way buyers buy has changed. It's no longer 1980 anymore. It's not even 2015 anymore. COVID changed everything. Buyers are way more aware of their options. They know how to independently research, and they want to do that research on their own before speaking to sales. They have online communities of friends and colleagues that they can reach out to get recommendations and find additional information from. And they expect and want more information from companies than ever before on the front end, as well as expecting companies to deliver on what they promise, which, let's be honest, not a lot of companies have over the years, which has led to a lot of skepticism and people being worried about some slick talking salesperson tricking them into buying something they don't need. The reality is the game has changed. So companies that aren't adapting to this new landscape are seeing decreasing conversion rates, rising cost per acquisitions, and longer sales cycles than ever, whilst their profit margins are shrinking away. And they're all focusing on trying to fix the wrong problems. It's not going to be some slick sales script or some new objection handling secret or some masterful sales training that is going to change this. It's not going to be some silver bullet ad strategy that all of a sudden has ready to go buyers knocking at your door. There is a fundamental infrastructure breakdown with how a lot of companies are selling these days. And why should you listen to me on this? I don't want to spend 10 minutes talking about myself, but just to give you a bit of a snapshot of my background, the last few years, here's a few of the companies that I have consulted to, handful of the results that they've got, primarily with either pre-revenue or startup businesses going to 6, 7, even 8 figures in a couple of cases. And I learned very early on in my sales career that standard sales models are broken. And companies that are following this are seeing their profits erode more and more over time. And that's why we're seeing higher churn than ever across sales departments, not only at management and VP level, but individual team members as well. When compared to here at Shapers OS, we're seeing conversion rates at 75% or higher, cheaper cost per acquisitions than ever, and shortening sales cycles, whilst profit margins are expanding or at the very least staying the same. We're not burning through cash and shrinking our profit margins to, in some cases, being non-existent. And this is all done through making the revenue process more efficient. So where do founders go wrong when implementing their revenue engine? Well, they start off with the wrong data first and foremost. They have the wrong data modeling. Now, a lot of them have been taught either something like X amount of dollars on ads equals X amount of leads equals X amount of calls, X amount of sales, etc. Or if they're using reverse headcount modeling, it's X amount of reps equals X amount of calls, X amount of meetings, and X amount of revenue. And then they just try and solve the equation for X. Problem is, this doesn't scale. And the more you pour into it, the worse it gets. Because the efficiency of the market model just doesn't work, because you're constantly chasing colder and colder audiences as you expand the market. And your only option to continue expanding this machine is via time, which is the most expensive resource you can invest in. And it also assumes that all leads are equal, which they are not, which I'll go through in a minute. Now, this wrong data is also leading to misaligned KPIs. So it's pitting marketing versus sales versus customer success versus finance, and all of these departments are kind of against each other. None of them are working in sync towards a company objective. So marketing will typically get scored on how many leads they bring in, which encourages them to optimize for the highest volume, not the highest quality. So they go for the cheapest leads, which generally equals low quality and has no quality control over it. SDRs, if a company has them, are typically scored on how many meetings they booked, not how many meetings convert. So therefore they just book as many meetings as they can so they can obviously get paid. Then sales is the only team that's then scored on revenue. And because they're generally getting all these low quality meetings, which then leads them to disliking their SDRs or disliking marketing, but they also start bringing through questionable clients as well because they don't have the opportunities to bring through high quality clients. Then that leads to customer success, obviously getting annoyed at sales because they're bringing in the wrong clients and forcing them to always be in damage control. And then finance are being scored on obviously keeping the company profitable, which means they end up just cutting costs wherever they see things are being possibly inefficient, but they don't understand how the revenue engine works. So they can say, oh, well, marketing is doing really well. They're getting really cheap leads. It must be our sales team that sucks because they are not closing well. let's cut our sales team and then that should fix everything. Wrong mindset and complete departmental misalignment. And then this results into scaling chaos. So as I said before, the more you push this machine, the more you try and run these models through, the higher your salaries and expenses will increase, your team efficiency will decrease over time to a point where it, in some cases, is actually a negative return on the team investment. Your team churn increases as well because their ability to hit targets and grow in their profession will continue to diminish. Client churn increases because we're selling people we shouldn't be selling. Brand equity and goodwill in the market will decrease as well because obviously dissatisfied customers will then go and give bad reviews and add comments to ads and all that sort of stuff. And once this machine and beast is running, it's almost impossible to tailor it back without fully stripping the entire system down because it will just keep demanding more money and time, not to grow, but just to sustain and not fall apart. So hence, scaling chaos. And where I saw this was at my first ever sales job. They'd already been through 2 sales teams by the time I got there, and I got hired to do a booking role. And I had crazily high KPIs, 50 bookings a week, 85% show up rate, which I've never seen anything that high since then. And through doing that sheer volume of numbers and bookings, I noticed that the discrepancy between lead quality was massive. And I would just spend all day working through numbers of leads to try and get bookings, which, because of my KPIs, in some cases led me to booking appointments that I probably shouldn't have booked for the sales team, but had to based on my KPIs so that I could hit the number. Now that showed me why they'd already lost 2 sales teams, because every time they tried to expand the team, they had to expand the marketing budget, and because their strategy was misaligned and their data model was misaligned, they were just trying to optimize for the most amount of leads at the cheapest rate, which obviously as you expand into wider markets, the quality of those leads dramatically decreased. So for me, shortly after I moved into sales, everyone else quit. So for 3 months, it was just me in the sales department for the company. I was having to do the bookings, the sales, and the onboarding versus just the sales that the team were doing previously. But what was surprising was on an individual level, I actually outperformed the previous team. I hit the most amount of sales in a week, the most amount of sales in a month, not because I was way better at sales than them, but because I was able to focus on quality. The marketing budget reduced, so therefore they tightened in on the market that they were marketing to, because the amount of leads they needed obviously shrunk quite a bit. So that lifted the quality of the leads coming through. For me, I was able to be way more picky because I was doing 3 roles. They basically said, don't worry about the KPIs, just do your best, make as many sales as you can. So I was able to focus on just booking people in that I thought would be great clients and a great fit for the company. And that then in turn increased customer retention as well. So we had a lot better clients coming through per rep, because obviously it was just me. We were making much more revenue and the business survived that period. But then they went and hired 5 more people. So they expanded the sales team again. Then they just expanded the budget, flooded the business with a bunch of leads. The quality of those leads fell off a cliff. So where in the month of December, I hit 17 sales, come the February after the other team had been ramped in, with all 6 sellers, the team only hit somewhere between 25 to 30 sales. So for a more than 500% increase in expenses with the increased marketing budget, 5 additional salaries, there was a less than 100% return on revenue compared to my best month. So that was my first sign that this sort of operating model, this X equals X equals X sort of model, is broken. It just didn't work at scale. And every time a company I've seen has tried it, they either run into a ceiling and they get capped at a certain level and they end up staying there for years, wondering why, because they just continue trying to grow this model that's not built to grow, or they need to bring in investor capital to get a larger runway. Then they try and hire more people to increase the revenue, but it just, again, gets more and more inefficient as time goes on. Or in the case of the business I was at, they actually went out of business after that last sales team because they couldn't sustain the model. All departments were misaligned, marketing was just getting a lot of leads and didn't have any quality controls over it. There were no bookers at that point, everyone was just in sales, but sales were just closing what they could, which led to poor quality customers, a lot of refunds, a lot of customers complaining and wanting to quit, which led to a toxic environment, obviously then bad brand equity in the market. Now contrast that to the second big company that I ended up selling for, where I was able to implement everything that I'd learned from this company of what not to do at this one, and we're able to reach that 8-figure bracket. Now I won't go into that story here, but in a later video I'll just share a little bit more on the strategies we use in that. but I saw a key difference and distinction between a model that scales and a model that doesn't. And scaling chaos obviously doesn't work. So what needs to change? Firstly, we need to shift the mindset, because the mindset will influence the actions we take. So this includes all leads are not equal. That's like saying all people are exactly the same. They're not. Everyone's got different life stories and different journeys, so it doesn't make sense in the first place to operate that way. Creating a buying journey versus a selling journey, a subtle but key distinction between building for the buyer and just trying to sell stuff. Standardizing your definition of pipeline so that you can forecast properly. Scale simplicity in the business, not the chaos we mentioned before, and also address return on time. Look at how much time is going into a particular channel to produce a return on investment, because you are paying for that time, so you better know where it's going. So you have to lead with the right data, first and foremost. Now this is obviously that initial model that I mentioned. So you've got the leads coming in here. There's no distinction or breakdown between what a lead is. They all just get lumped under MQL regardless of source. Someone tries to book them in, whether it's a automated booking or a person that goes and books them in. Then sales runs a discovery if it's a 2-call close, or they'll just pitch. If it's a 2-call close, they'll run a discovery of some sort and then go into pitching. And then obviously a certain percentage will win and lose. So the standard model just assumes that all leads are equal, and if we just get enough leads, we'll get enough pitches, which will give us enough revenue. Now it sounds good on paper, so what's the issue with this? There are 0 quality control measures in place with this sort of system. We have no transparency on what constitutes a lead. Obviously people in the company will know, okay, well, generally our best leads come from here, but the process doesn't shift at all depending on where that lead comes from. They all get forced through this same approach. And again, because marketing is being scored on how many MQLs they get, they just tend to try and optimize for the cheapest, which then this guy, as I did, starts going, oh, well, I'm not getting the best leads, but I just need to book calls to hit my numbers, so I'll just book them in. And then sales ends up having to field meetings with unqualified prospects or people that aren't even looking to buy at this stage, which then results in sales being annoyed at the SDRs or marketing, and our closing percentage goes down. But where a lot of companies will look at is, oh, well, it must be our sales team that sucks. We need to do more sales training. We need to help them overcome more objections and stuff like that. That's exactly what happened at the company I was at. They were so focused down this end that they didn't realize that the problem stemmed from up here, because the entire model and infrastructure was broken. And you could bring in the best salespeople on earth, and yeah, they might close a little bit more, but it still doesn't change the fact that they're speaking to the wrong people. You're going to have low customer retention, and obviously those unicorn sellers are few and far between. So we need to dissect the funnel. We need to understand where our highest quality buying journeys are coming from. Because when all leads are treated equal, you're not only going to waste a lot of time and money, but you're going to possibly lose high value prospects through the cracks, because they're all, again, being treated the same. They're all just being pushed through this conveyor belt sales process. So when companies just start trying to optimize for the cheapest MQL, obviously that's going to push them out to the outer perimeters of their market. So the quality is going to get worse and worse and worse, because the prospects are going to be less and less educated before they actually speak to sales. And because speaking to sales obviously requires sales time, you are now trying to scale through time. You're not optimizing your process. Time is the most expensive resource to try and scale through. So the bigger this expands, the worse the performance gets as a whole, because there are obviously various sources that prospects come through with varying intent as well. They might come through your website, your email, social media. They might reach out to you there. They might click on some of your paid ads. You might meet them at an event, or they come to an event. You might get referrals. All of these sources have varying levels of intent, but also varying levels of outcome as well. They have varying conversion rates, varying ACVs, varying lifetime values, as well as a bunch of other obviously metrics that we want to understand for the business. Now I'll pull up a document in a second just to go through what dissecting the funnel might look like, but just to look at some of the metrics we want to track across the board. We want to understand our pipeline velocity, how fast is our pipeline moving, understand our lead to opportunity conversion rate, our lead to win rate, overall win rate, our marketing or ad spend cost per acquisition, so how much are we spending to acquire a client, and then what's the payback period on that cost per acquisition? Are we instantly profitable? Does it take 3 months of a client being on board, 6 months, whatever it is? The blended marketing ROI, so that includes all expenses marketing invests to create the revenue, the blended cost per acquisition ROI, or even blended ROI in total. That includes sales and marketing. So making sure that all expenses that go into acquiring a client are factored into our ROI. And then lastly, return on time. So our overall efficiency of the system. So I'll just pull across a quick document to do source analysis through. So as you can see, we've got multiple different sources here, declared pipelines. So people that actively outreach and say, hey, we want to speak to sales. Low intent lead gens, people that just downloading stuff, haven't signaled any intent to buy, any ABM work, or cold outbound, partners, email, like obviously the list of sources goes on and on. But the main thing that we want to do is break them out into various sources and understand how these sources are performing. Because again, if your marketing team is scored on the cheapest leads possible, generally they will come through a low intent lead gen model. And after auditing and working with dozens of businesses over the last year, I've seen that this model is the least efficient for all key metrics that we track when assessing revenue performance. But because it's the cheapest, marketing put more budget down here. By doing this source analysis, we can break these sources out. And we do have some other tabs down here. This document will be included in the templates that you can grab with the button below. But we've got some forecasting, we've got understanding our max cost per acquisition and spend. But in terms of the source analysis, we can then take that a level deeper and break out our point of conversion and see where our best point of conversion is as well. Because under each source, we'll have varying conversion points. So our declared pipeline, for example, might have a demo or contact us or trial request, whatever you consider as a direct reach out saying, hey, I want to speak to sales. So then we can dig even deeper on the performance of our overall revenue engine. And then we can obviously look at pay performance, and we've got some graphs on there as well. So grab this document. It will help you start to dissect and understand your funnel. But let's just jump back to the slides. Cool. So once we know what data to track, now we can start building the operating model because we're measuring properly. Having the wrong data is like trying to go right and running left. You want to go over here, but you're running in this direction. You're like, why aren't I getting that way? Well, it's because you're running in the wrong direction. The data is sending you down the wrong path. So now that we have the right data models in place, now we can build the operating model. And I call this an influenced buying journey because although, yes, it is a sales process, it's not a process where we're trying to get someone to a yes. It's a process where we're trying to help a buyer buy, hence being an influenced buying journey. So for us, we have 6 stages. For example, we have the hero offer, which is what you guys are in now. You're in our workshop, which is helping you understand how we think, what we see as potential opportunities, and then if you align to that, obviously great. Then you would generally move to stage 2, being a meeting booked. Then you would go to stage 3, which is our transition bridge, which filters prospects out. So you get an understanding of what we do, how we do it, etc. So that if it's not for you, you can just jump off the ship straight away. Then we'll go through a discovery meeting, then we'll book the next meeting, and then obviously have a sales meeting. So I'll bring up the workshop flow, which is obviously what you're in now for us, as to how this would look. All right, so this system over on the right, we have our demand engine. So capturing demand, we're either capturing in-market demand or demand that we've created. So if we have an offer that people already want, obviously we try and capture that initially. But we also want to have an idea of how we can create demand for the business as well, so we're not relying on capturing demand. So whether you're a startup watching this or an experienced operator with a small sales team or a big sales team, you need to understand how your demand engine is working. So working off the right data will obviously help inform this. So for us, we obviously run into this workshop, which ensures there's value alignment before someone moves across to the buying journey, the influence buying journey, or the sales process, whatever you want to call it. So below this, you obviously have the option to grab the templates. There is an opt-in just for email. We're not going to chase you around with a number, but once you've clicked through that, there will then be on the next page an opportunity to grab a revenue audit and book a call. Now on the page after that is a transition bridge. This goes through what we do, how we do it, how much it costs, so that by the time we have this audit, it is purely focused on the buyer and how we can help. If we can't help, then obviously they will have learned that from here, but we can shorten this call. If we can help, then we move to the next call. Now for some businesses, this might be a 1-call close. Obviously, if you've got a pretty simple solution. If you don't have a simple solution and you customize it like we do, then it might be a 2-call close. And for us, if we qualify someone here, so they've self-qualified throughout here in terms of, yeah, we resonate with these guys' philosophy, let's hear what they have to say. They come through to this side. you watch the transition bridge and go, yeah, okay, well, what they do makes sense. Let's definitely have a call. We qualify them from here and say, yep, all right, we think we can help you. If we get to this side and it turns out we can't help at this stage, what I like to do is offer a constellation offer so that at least their time is not wasted. So for us, we give free templates to build this funnel so that a business can possibly implement it themselves. But whatever a constellation offer is for you, that's one, obviously a way to increase our show up rates for these calls, but also a way to make sure we value our prospects' time. So regardless of what happens here, if it's closed won or closed lost, they leave with some value, which then equates to goodwill in the market. Our time's not wasted, their time's not wasted, and you never know what's happened for us. A lot of times is sometimes we've found out that, okay, it's maybe not the right fit or not the right time to work with a business, or they've said it's not the right time. We give them the constellation offer, they really like it, they either give it to someone else and then they come to us and end up becoming a client, or they come back a few months later and like, yeah, I implemented everything you gave me in that, whether it was funnel or whatever the constellation offer was, and then they become a client. So it's just planting these seeds of goodwill in the market. So that is the workshop flow. All of these areas could have individual trainings on themselves, but obviously we don't have time for that at the moment. So let's jump back to the slides. So that's our buying journey for this one, for example. Now, once we understand what the buying stages are, now we can implement what's known as Hero Pipeline. Now, this is a measurement standard introduced by Refine Labs, a company over in America, which stands for High Intent Revenue Opportunities. And whether you are a startup or an experienced business running with a big team, you should be operating off the right model. Just like I said before, even if you've just started and you're a founder that's still doing the sales and you're about to hire your first salesperson, or you don't even want to hire salespeople and you're just doing the sales yourself, reading the wrong data can send you in the wrong direction. So regardless of your stage, you need to understand where your best performing buying journeys are. Now, that could be direct outreach, people reaching out to you, and then we optimize for that, outbound, referrals, lead gen, whatever it is, we need to map that out. So how we do that is we break down the pipeline sources of what we've got, and even if you've had 10 inbound leads, that's enough to start tracking your source. You might have 100 lead gen, you might have done 10 outbound calls or sent people messages on LinkedIn, you might be getting referrals. So everyone's got a number of different pipeline sources, even if they don't know it. The smallest businesses do, even businesses that are barely scraping six figures, they've generally got something happening email-wise. They'll maybe have some sort of lead gen going on. They'll most likely be doing some sort of outbound, obviously because they're trying to get some traction, and the occasional inbound might come through as well. So again, by doing this properly from the start, we don't have to fix it later on, which is generally where I get called in. So we break down into source, then we break down into our buying stages. So stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, so for us, obviously that's all these stages. Now, hero is defined when a prospect reaches a stage in a particular source that generally converts at 25% or higher on average, versus bucketing all of these stage 1 leads and saying they're all pipeline, which is generally what that old model, this model, will do. They bucket all these MQLs together and they make no distinction as to the quality of those leads. They all just get bucketed into pipeline. Now, one, this can obviously lead to highly inefficient usage of time because, again, not bashing on lead gen, but from what I've seen, it is the least efficient, at least at scale, useful at times in the business, and can be a good source just to top up revenue, but shouldn't be a core structure of a business. You might see that, okay, well, we're getting the cheapest leads from here, and we got all this pipeline building up because you're not dissecting into source, so they're just going to run more lead gen campaigns, try and get cheaper and cheaper leads. But what's not being broken out is, okay, well, the timing, one, in terms of the time that we have to invest to get someone to stage 5 before they actually become hero pipeline, because we're counting all of these opportunities as pipeline, but also that they need to reach stage 5 to become actual pipeline. Now that can mess up with your forecasting, because if you're bucketing all of these together and you've got leads that are converting at different speeds, different rates, different ACVs, but you don't understand why they're all converting at all these different stages, then your forecast from here, you might have 1,000 leads and go, oh, well, of 1,000 leads, based on our previous percentage model, we should have $1 million in pipeline. But because the company has maybe started optimizing for this because it's the cheapest, they don't realize that 990 are in here, which they don't reach actual pipeline until they're at stage 5, and only 10 are coming from inbound inquiries, potentially. So that $1 million that we forecasted because we have 1,000 leads in the system is actually only, if we broke it down into source, forecasted at 300,000. Now that can obviously really impact a business in terms of not only the aggression that they try and grow, but even your hiring as well. You might have gone, oh, well, we've got $1 million in pipeline, let's hire 2 more people to keep this machine moving. And then that $1 million doesn't come in and you're like, oh no, I've got these salaries and these overheads now to cover because we forecasted wrong. And it can be the other way around as well. You can under forecast because you might be driving more inbound and bucketing all these together. And you go, oh wow, we way outperformed what we were anticipating. We could have been more aggressive. And then you end up being more aggressive. And generally when I've seen that happen, I actually saw that happen in a company before, they were smashing their KPIs. So then they tried to expand aggressively, quality of the leads nosedived, and the forecast model completely flipped. And they were wondering why they weren't converting as much, because they expanded the marketing budget and reduced the quality because they were running this model. So they were performing well for a period, they got cocky, they just increased the MQLs, and then these percentages slowly started dropping until the business started missing KPIs, and they go, what's going on? We're getting more leads than ever. Why are we converting less? And then who gets the blame? Sales. So they go, oh, well, our sales team sucks. Then sales go, well, no, it's not us. Marketing sucks. We're getting junk leads because salespeople aren't stupid. They can tell the difference between a good lead and a bad lead. And then they all quit. We get high team churn. We've got to hire more people, train more people. The system just keeps breaking and breaking and breaking. And obviously we can end up either out of business, capped, or requiring outside investment. So by measuring off Hiro, we can now get an accurate forecast of where our system is at and where our revenue engine is performing versus blanketing everything together, trying to scale it, seeing those percentages slowly dwindle off till the point where it all breaks. Now we're running a bit over time, so we're going to zoom through the rest. So next we need to start optimizing for Hiro. Once we understand where our Hiro is coming from, and again, you just need, a startup can do this. You should be doing this from day one in your business. Obviously, you're going to be scrappy in the early days trying to just get cash flow where you can, but as soon as you have some sort of continuity and you have some sort of marketing plan that's going to ideally produce you leads, even if it's just cold calling all day, you need to be tracking Hiro. You need to be tracking these other metrics that we discussed before so that you're heading in the right path, not wanting to go over here and running in the wrong direction. So to start optimizing for Hiro, we need to understand our buyer's journey. We need to optimize for the best possible buying journey and the most profitable buying journey for us. So there are generally 3 stages. We went through that in the little skeleton breakdown of the system. So you got creating demand, which is generally dark social. So that's looking at things like your podcast or posts or speaking to friends, like just things that you can't track digitally. Then we've got capturing demand, which are things you can track digitally. So you can capture in-market demand as well as demand you're creating. Roll that into the hero offer, and then we have a conversion process off the back, the influence buying journey. So how do we start to understand this buying journey and what's going to be most optimal for our particular audience? We first need to speak to them. We need to speak to people who are within our ICP. Now, I'm not going to go into the questions on this. In the downloads, you will get a ICP questionnaire so that you can start conducting these interviews and getting that qualitative data. Then do your online research, go into forums, groups, look at reviews, look at the sort of language your buyers are using, look at the sort of problems they're facing, the sort of solutions they want, how they're wording it. You just need to understand everything about your buyer because that will inform, firstly, how you start to capture in-market demand to obviously get the ball rolling and get revenue coming through the door, but then how you start to create demand as well. Because buyers don't buy linearly. Now this is just a small snapshot of like a possible buying journey, but there is way more before even this bit. There's way more nuance within it. But the main message I'm trying to get across is people don't just go from A to B. They don't just wake up one day and see something they've never heard of before, they've got no idea what it is and decide to buy it. Very rarely, unless it's some sort of random knickknack that costs $5. Anything of significant investment, they're generally going to do a little bit of research, or they're going to have some sort of stimulus that leads them on this path. Now, if you were only tracking digital attribution, if you're doing last click attribution, you might be just looking at this ad here and going, well, this one's converting the best, let's pour all our money here. And then it scales out and breaks, which is, again, what happened with the first company I was at. The quality diluted as they scaled those offers out, and it broke. Or you might be doing first click attribution and going, oh, well, this one's our best. It's the first thing people are clicking on that do become clients. We'll pour more money on this. And then start to neglect all these other areas that people are going through to eventually end up on a conversion. Now, by interviewing prospects, you'll also find that before they even contemplate anything to do with you and go through your own little ecosystem that you create, they will have a journey prior to that as well. There will be a common thread of challenges that they've faced, things they've tried in the past, people or businesses that they've looked to for these solutions and either got them or not got them. There's an entire journey that happens before a prospect even comes into your ecosystem. But once they come into your ecosystem, then there is an entire journey that happens for them within that as well. Then they eventually convert. So we need to understand the qualitative and quantitative data. We can't just look at the numbers on a spreadsheet and look at the digital attribution. We need to understand how this journey is possibly coming together so that, again, we can start to optimize for Hyro. We can optimize for our most profitable buying journeys. So what happens when you start to operate this way? The typical results we see is 70% plus conversions. We see ACV increases of 36% because the buyers are coming in educated and generally ready to spend more. Because of that, the retention rates shoot through the roof because there's no false expectations created during the buying journey. The LTVs obviously increase by a minimum of 41% because the retention rates are jumping up. That then sees profit margins shoot up as well by at least 100%. And that's not obviously to say the business becomes fully profitable, but if the margins are like 20%, it goes to 40%, and often we see more than that. The pipeline velocity reduces by weeks, not days, so we shorten those sales cycles right down. And lastly, our sales team productivity and retention increases dramatically as well. So we're getting more for our investment into our team, plus they're sticking around for longer, so we're not having to constantly recycle through. So how can you implement this for yourself? Well, if you'd like the templates, as I mentioned just below, you can grab those there. Just click the button below this video, and we'll only be asking for email. We're not going to chase you around with calls. Obviously, it's not part of our process, and I think it's really annoying. So we're not going to do that. On the next page, there will be an opportunity to grab a revenue audit. So check that out, see if it might be suitable for you. But if you just want the templates, they will include the ICP questionnaire, the market research guide, a revenue performance tracker, the operating and data model guide as well, so you can put some definitions to the things we went through today, as well as the signature system funnel framework. So that's it for this training. Grab the template so you can start implementing some of this for yourself. And if you want us to go under the hood and see what's happening in your revenue engine and where we can potentially make things more efficient, grab an audit on the next page and we'll see what we can do for you.